is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my May 2024 reading wrap-up. This was a month that I'm not sure that I accomplished everything that I wanted to during it, reading-wise at least, but I'm also not mad at where I ended up either, so that's nice. We have manga, we have a readathon, we have a couple of other things as well. I will have the content warnings for everything that I can find linked down below in the description, along with links to some resources, and with that, let's go ahead and get into it. To start this video off with Volume 9 of Yona of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi, and this follows our main character Yona, who is a princess who is living the perfect life. However, that all changes one day when she witnesses the murder of her father. She flees with her guard and they struggle to survive and evade their enemies while also dealing with the shock of what just happened, especially with the path ahead of them so unclear. So I recently did a rewatch of the anime to prepare for this volume, and I think I was technically supposed to start in the volume before this one for just like a couple of chapters, but from what I can tell, I don't really think I missed anything important. But I did have a really great time with this volume. It was super fun and adorable. The cast of characters just has a ton of chemistry with one another. But the story does have a few moving parts to it. I'm really enjoying the structure of this story so far, and I'm just looking forward to reading more. I've been meaning to read this series for a long time now, so it's very nice that that is finally happening. Next up is Wild Beauty by Marie-McLemore, and this follows a family of women who, when they fall in love too deeply, then that person vanishes. However, after many generations of this happening, a mysterious boy appears in their gardens without any memory of who he is. And as our main character tries to help him piece his past back together, the grounds of the lush estate gardens that her family tends to leads them towards dangerous secrets. This was an interesting one in terms of just how I feel about it. I really love the atmosphere and I had a good time reading it. And I was interested in the story, especially towards the end. I also did like the writing style, although I definitely did have to look up some of the flowers just to get like the full vibe, and eventually I did just kind of give up on that because it was so much, but that is more my lack of knowledge than this book's fault, but it really did feel like a lot. I also thought that this book had a tendency to like say something and then really dive into that one thing for quite a few paragraphs or even pages, and it really only felt like this book was repeating that one thing over and over again, so I'm not really sure how much I got out of those or really needed those paragraphs. That being said, I do think that I would really love to see a movie version of this because I feel like the structure of the story would work really well in that format, and I did really like the structure of the story and I did like this book overall. But I feel like I would probably enjoy watching this story more and just seeing all of the characters and the world and some of the really amazing imagery that this book has. I ended up giving Wild Beauty by Marie-McLemore 3 out of 5 stars. Next up is If You Still Recognize Me by Cynthia, and this follows our main character who is about to confess her feelings to her long-distance best friend and crush that she met through a comic fandom. However, when her childhood best friend comes back into her life after many years of no contact, our main character spends the summer both making new connections and repairing old ones. This was my first finished read of the Asian Readathon, which I will have links down below in the description related to that, and it was also, in fact, my best read of the Asian Readathon. It had a lot of coming of age themes, it explored identity, self-expression, loneliness, it also had a ton of cute relationships and also a ton of really complex ones, and overall this book just explored things in ways that I really appreciated, even if I do wish that I got a little bit more from certain characters and relationships, especially in the romance area. I also love this book's focus on comics and fandom. It felt very relatable at times. I thought this book had a nice summary atmosphere as well, with a good amount of mystery that did kind of feel too fictional at times, but it was also just nice to see our main character get the answers that she was searching for, so I'm not too mad at that. And the mystery elements did also help keep me invested in this book. So between that and the character exploration and the relationships, I feel like I flew through this. And I ended up giving If You Still Recognize Me by Cynthia 4.75 out of 5 stars. And next up is Strike the Zither by Joan, and this is a reimagining of the Chinese classic Three Kingdoms, and it follows our main character Zephyr, who has become the best strategist in the land, serving under one of the 3 warlordesses who are hoping to claim the continent for themselves. Zephyr is forced to infiltrate an enemy camp in order for her side to survive, and she meets an opposing strategist who is actually able to match her, but she soon finds out that she has more enemies than she originally thought. Okay, so this was not an audiobook that I was expecting to consume this month, but it had been a few years since I read a book by this author, Zither, and it popped up in what I think were actually quite a few Instagram posts with book recommendations, and it just felt like the universe was pointing me to this series, and I'm so glad that it did. I always tend to love books that have a focus on strategizing and politicking when done well, and this was definitely one of those books. I also just really enjoyed having a strategist for our main character. I did really like her. I wouldn't say that she's likable all the time, for me at least, but she also does have a good character arc, and we did eventually gel together. It just took some time. And I do think that there were quite a few things about this book that took some time for me, because I do think that this book took a little bit too long to really let me in on what it was actually doing, which I do think hurt the development and just like my understanding of quite a few of the characters and the relationships. But once it did let me in, that all went away, and it makes a lot of sense now looking back at it, but it just wasn't as fun for me in the moment because there were so many good and fun moments that I felt like were getting dragged down by this. But this is a book that's not afraid to take risks. It's not afraid to change things up. It has a lot of fun twists and turns and surprises, and that's my favorite thing about it. And every time I would start to get bored, it would do something to fully bring me back in. And eventually, I was just fully invested and engaged and having so much fun with this book for just so much of it. I immediately started listening to the sequel after I finished it, which will be a review for June. But for now, I gave Strike the Zither by Joan 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up is My First and Only Love by Sahar Khalifeh, and this follows our main character who met her first and only real love in a freedom fighter. They meet again years later, and he encourages her to read her uncle's memoirs that tell of her family and national past. This was my second finished read of the Asian readathon, and it did take a little bit longer than I would have liked for it to get to like what the actual description says that it is. Like, there was a point where I was pretty deep into this book where I was like, wait, was I wrong just about what the description of this book is? So I flipped it over, looked at the back. I was not. We just weren't there yet. And what I ended up realizing once we did get there is I actually did prefer the beginning of this book to the later half. And that's not to say that that portion of the book didn't have its moments, because it did. It was definitely worth reading. But it also just went on a little bit long for me, and there was a more main character that I wasn't super happy to see more of that was showing up more. And it was that portion of the book that made me realize that I wasn't super happy to see him. And the beginning of this book was like a build up to that description, and it felt like a deep dive into our main character's past, while also getting glimpses of her present, and I was super invested in it. And I do think that this book is a very interesting and thought-provoking story all around. I also really liked the writing style, and I thought that the author made a lot of really smart and, again, interesting choices when it comes to the writing that both felt refreshing and also made this book feel special. It also dives into life under occupation and their fight against it, and this book is set in the past. But there's also a line in here that basically says that this type of occupation always ends, but under whose lifetime? Which is not the exact quote, but it is a line that really did stick out to me, and also really did hit me because you do see the toll that this fight takes on the characters and just the exhaustion, and you're just kind of left with the knowledge that this book is set pretty far into the past and that occupation is still ongoing today. And it just makes you think about all the people who have passed or who are going to pass before this occupation ends. And yeah, it's heartbreaking, and again, I thought this was a really thought-provoking book. And on that note, I do have links to resources in the descriptions of my videos. There are donation links and a lot of information links as well. And I will be giving My First and Only Love by Sahar Khalifeh 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up is Volume 3 of Blue Period by Tsubasa Yamaguchi, and this follows our main character Yatara, who is a high school student, and despite his good grades and group of friends, he is living a pretty dull life. However, that all changes when he wanders into the art room one day and sees a painting that awakens him to the world and beauty of art, which compels him into learning about and creating art himself and experiencing all of the challenges that come with it. And this was my final read of the Asian readathon. It was the book that I completed my Asian readathon with, and it was also my backup read in case one of my pre-orders didn't come in on time, which it really has not. So there's that, but this is about this volume, and this volume definitely did help get me back into this series since it had been a little bit of a while since I've read volume 2, and even longer before that since I read volume 1, but I do think that this is a series that is very easy to get lost in whenever I do pick it up, and I think that's mostly because of the characters. Again, it's a large cast, they have a lot of chemistry with one another, and also each character is interesting on their own, and I do think that that's really important for this series, and it's also one of the main things that I do really love about this series. It also has a good amount of drama, and it's just really nice to see all of the art and all of the hard work that the characters are putting into chasing their dreams, and I'm definitely excited to keep reading reading here. This is a series that has a lot of volumes and a lot of story that I have yet to read, and I feel like I see an exciting new character every time that I haul another volume from this series, so I'm curious to see who they are and just where it's all going to go, and I'm just really enjoying the journey here. Next up is RuriDragon by Masaoki Shindou, and this follows our main character Ruri as she tries to live her normal day-to-day life after waking up one morning with dragon horns growing from the top of her head. This was a series that I started when it first started in Shonen Jump, and honestly I didn't really love it and probably wasn't going to end up reading more of it. So when it went on hiatus almost immediately and I found out about how much people loved it, I felt like I was missing out on something. And then a lot of time went by and that hiatus lasted longer and longer. But there have been some new chapters recently and it's just really lovely to see the series active again, whether I'm into it or not, which I am, by the way. Very much so. I basically started over from chapter 1 towards the end of May, and I read the whole thing in one day, which is not a hard thing to do. There aren't that many chapters still. But if it did have a lot of chapters, I probably still would have read them all and been perfectly happy about it. The series just has so much heart and it has so many adorable characters, humor, and just peaceful, comfy, slice-of-life moments. And it also still does feel like a Shonen Jump series. Like, it still has that kind of format when it comes to the structure of the story, but it also just feels so extremely refreshing for Shonen Jump at the same time. I don't necessarily know what went differently for me between this time that I read it and the last time that I tried to read it. Like, I'm not sure what really made me fall in love with it this time around compared to the first, but I am so glad that it happened. And I would just love to see the series have as much success as it could possibly have. I'll definitely be there for it for as long as it goes. And I'm excited for this series to join my group of amazing series that I'm currently caught up to and will be following along with over on the Shonen Jump and Manga Plus apps. Like, this feels like a series that is more than worthy of joining them. And speaking of those series, in the month of May, I also read chapters 109 to 111 of Akane-banashi, chapters 32 through 34 of Kagurabachi, chapters 148 to 150 of Blue Box, chapters 106.1 to 107 of Kaiju number 8, chapters 8.1 to 10 of Kaiju number 8 B-side, and chapters 54 and 55 of You and I Are Polar Opposites. Okay, so that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!